Before it was a battleground, before prophets walked its hills, Jerusalem was just a hilltop village, nameless, modest, forgotten by empires. But even then, something about this place drew people in. Archaeological evidence suggests that as early as 3000 BCE, Canaanite tribes settled around a water source known today as the Gihon Spring. They built rudimentary walls, mud brick houses, and simple shrines. To them, this wasn't just survival, it was sacred ground. By 2000 BCE, the city had grown into a small fortress town called Urusalim, meaning foundation of Shalom, named after a Canaanite god of dusk and peace. Ironically, this city named for peace would know very little of it. The city's location made it valuable, perched high, surrounded by valleys, and near trade routes. But its true power came from something deeper: mystery, faith, and myth. To early peoples, the rock under Jerusalem wasn't just stone, it was the bridge between heaven and earth. By the time Egypt began expanding its empire northward, Jerusalem had already become a prize. Pharaohs mentioned it in their war records. Letters from Jerusalem's rulers begged Egypt for aid, showing it was already a city worth defending. But even amid invasions and shifting powers, something made people stay. Jerusalem was no coastal capital. It had no mighty river, but it had a presence, a pull, a destiny. Long before prophets, kings, or temples, the soul of the city was already beating, quietly, in stone, in soil, in sky. By 1000 BCE, Jerusalem would no longer be just a hilltop town. It would become the heart of a kingdom. Enter King David, the warrior poet, the shepherd who rose to command a nation. After uniting the tribes of Israel, he conquered Jerusalem from the Jebusites. Why Jerusalem? It sat between the northern and southern tribes, neutral, strategic, symbolic. David made it his capital, and something shifted forever. Under David's rule, Jerusalem transformed from a fortress into a spiritual beacon. He brought the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred chest believed to hold the divine law, into the city. Drums beat, trumpets roared, and the people danced. This was more than a political move, it was destiny. But it was David's son Solomon who would take that vision to unimaginable heights. Around 957 BCE, Solomon built the first temple on Mount Moriah, a place already steeped in myth. It was said to be where Abraham nearly sacrificed his son. Now it became the center of Jewish worship. The temple wasn't just a building, it was a statement. Crafted with cedar from Lebanon, overlaid with gold, filled with sacred rituals and priestly chants, it echoed with power and holiness. Pilgrims came from distant lands. Jerusalem was no longer a tribal capital, it was the spiritual heart of a people. For a moment in time, the city stood still in peace, golden, united, and full of wonder. But this golden age would not last. Peace would not last. After Solomon's death, the kingdom split, north and south, Israel and Judah. Jerusalem remained the capital of Judah, but it was vulnerable. Surrounded by rising empires, its walls could only hold for so long. In 586 BCE, the Babylonians came, led by King Nebuchadnezzar. They breached Jerusalem's defenses, burned the city, and destroyed Solomon's temple. The sacred ark vanished, smoke choked the sky, and those who survived were dragged in chains to Babylon. It was more than just a military defeat. For the Jewish people, it was a spiritual collapse. A holy city turned to ash. But exile didn't erase faith. In Babylon, the idea of Jerusalem grew stronger. It became not just a place, but a symbol of hope, of return, of divine promise. Decades later, the Persian king Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon and allowed the exiles to return. A new temple, the Second Temple, rose from the ruins. Jerusalem was reborn, yet the city's fate was far from safe. Next came the Greeks under Alexander the Great, then civil strife. Then in 63 BCE, the Romans arrived. General Pompey entered the city, and with him came another empire that would shape Jerusalem for centuries. Under Roman rule, the city expanded. Roads, aqueducts, and fortresses appeared. A new ruler, Herod the Great, renovated the Second Temple into a grand marvel of stone and gold. But tension simmered. Faith, foreign power, and resistance collided like flint and steel. Jerusalem became a cauldron, boiling, restless, sacred, and unstable. The city had survived Babylon, but under Rome, its future would again hang by a thread. In the early years of the 1st century, Jerusalem stood at a crossroads of faith and empire. Roman banners flew high above its gates, but tension filled the air. The city had grown into a bustling center of politics, religion, and unrest. At its heart stood the Second Temple, now expanded by Herod the Great into a grand monument of marble and gold. Pilgrims poured in from all over the ancient world. But beneath the surface, resentment simmered. Rome's iron grip clashed with deep Jewish longing for freedom and prophecy. It was in this fragile moment that a carpenter's son from Nazareth entered the city, a man named Jesus. He didn't arrive with armies or crowns. He came on a donkey, greeted not by kings, but by ordinary people, waving palm branches and shouting, "Hosanna." To them, he was a savior, perhaps even the Messiah. Jesus taught in the courtyards of the temple. He spoke of love, justice, and the kingdom of heaven. He challenged corrupt priests and questioned Roman authority. His presence stirred both hope and fear. The city, already a tinderbox, was about to ignite. Within days, Jesus was arrested, betrayed, tried, and sentenced to death. Outside Jerusalem's walls on a Roman cross, he was executed like a rebel. And yet, it wasn't the end. For his followers, it was the beginning of something eternal. From the narrow streets of Jerusalem, a faith was born, one that would echo far beyond the city, beyond Judea, beyond Rome itself. But as Christianity rose, Jerusalem would soon face another fire, one that would leave the city in ruins once more. Jerusalem had already seen fire and glory, but in the 7th century, a new chapter began, one that would reshape the city forever. In the year 638 CE, Muslim forces, led by Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, entered Jerusalem. But there was no massacre, no conquest by blood. Instead, the Christian patriarch handed him the keys in peace. Umar entered the city humbly, walking barefoot, not as a conqueror, but as a guardian. For Muslims, Jerusalem held sacred weight. It was here, according to Islamic tradition, that the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven during the Isra and Miraj, a night journey that linked earth to the divine. Soon, a stunning structure rose on the Temple Mount, the Dome of the Rock, its golden dome shining over the city. Later, the Al-Aqsa Mosque was built nearby. Jerusalem became the 3rd holiest city in Islam, after Mecca and Medina. For centuries under Muslim rule, Jerusalem was a city of coexistence. Christians, Jews, and Muslims lived, not always equally, but side by side. Pilgrims came from all corners of the Islamic world. Scholars, poets, and traders filled its streets. A city of prayer had become a center of culture. But peace would not last. In 1099, the First Crusades stormed Jerusalem. European knights, fueled by religious zeal, breached the city and unleashed horror. Blood ran in the streets. Muslims and Jews were slaughtered. The Dome of the Rock was claimed as a Christian church. For nearly a century, Jerusalem remained in Crusader hands, until 1187, when the legendary Muslim general Salah al-Din, Saladin, retook the city. This time, there was no bloodbath. He spared civilians, restored holy sites, and reopened Jerusalem to all faiths. The city had been fought for and fought over, but in each conquest, it never lost its sacred heart. By the early 16th century, Jerusalem stood once again on the edge of change. In 1517, the mighty Ottoman Empire took control, and under their rule, the city would be reshaped for centuries to come. It was Suleiman the Magnificent, one of the empire's greatest sultans, who left the deepest mark. In the 1530s, he ordered the construction of the famous stone walls that still surround the old city today. Majestic gates were carved, markets revived, and sacred sites restored. Jerusalem thrived, not as a capital, but as a jewel of faith and pilgrimage within a vast empire. For nearly 400 years, the Ottomans governed Jerusalem. The city was modest in size but rich in spirit. Christians guarded the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Jews prayed at the Western Wall. Muslims cared for the Al-Aqsa Mosque and Dome of the Rock. It was far from perfect. Poverty persisted, tensions rose, but a delicate balance endured. That balance shattered in the early 20th century. As World War I raged, the Ottoman Empire began to collapse. In 1917, British forces led by General Edmund Allenby marched into Jerusalem, not on horseback, but on foot, in a symbolic gesture of humility. The British Mandate had begun. To some, British rule promised progress, railways, schools, and governance. But beneath the surface, tension brewed. Nationalist movements, Jewish immigration, and Arab resistance all clashed beneath Jerusalem's skies. The spiritual heart of three religions was now caught in a storm of modern politics. What began as a city of prophets was now becoming a city of promises and broken ones. The 20th century tore the world apart, and Jerusalem was caught at the heart of it. In 1948, after decades of tension, war broke out. The State of Israel was declared, and Jerusalem, sacred to all, was now split. West Jerusalem came under Israeli control. East Jerusalem, including the Old City, was held by Jordan. Barbed wire divided neighborhoods. Families were separated. Holy places stood behind lines of soldiers. But the division didn't last. In 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israel captured East Jerusalem. For the first time in nearly 2,000 years, Jews returned to the Western Wall under Jewish control. The Temple Mount, the Dome of the Rock, and Al-Aqsa Mosque remained under Islamic trust, but now under Israeli sovereignty. Since then, Jerusalem has stood in both light and shadow. To some, it is the eternal capital, a symbol of national identity and spiritual rebirth. To others, it is occupied territory, a place of dispossession and longing. Peace talks have risen and fallen. Protests and prayers echo in the same streets. Bullet holes share space with ancient stones. It is a city claimed by history and wounded by it. And yet, life continues. Children laugh in schoolyards. Worshippers bow in mosques, churches, and synagogues. Artists paint its skyline. Pilgrims weep at its gates. Jerusalem endures, not just as a place, but as a question, a crossroads, a mirror, a promise. It is sacred and scarred, divided and whole. A city where time stands still and history never stops moving. Jerusalem isn't just a city. It's a heartbeat of history, a mirror of humanity, and a place where time never stops moving. If this story moved you, if it made you see Jerusalem in a new light, then don't let it end here. Like this video to help more people discover this history. Comment your thoughts. Was there a moment that stayed with you? Subscribe for more forgotten, untold, and powerful stories from history. This is only one city story, but history is full of them.